Church Radio. You can follow Linda at Earth Files. She doesn't need any more followers. She's got millions. Linda Moulton Howe, one of my favorite guests. She is a graduate of Stanford University with a master's degree in communication. She has devoted her documentary, film, television, radio, writing, and reporting career to productions concerning science, medicine, and the environment. She has received local, national, and international awards, including one in England. We're going to talk about that in just a second. Just received. She has 3 regional Emmys, a national Emmy nomination, and, of course, a Station Peabody Award. She produces, reports, and edits EarthFiles.com, one of the Internet's great treasures. She has her own radio program with John Burroughs, Phenomenon, over at KGRA, along with us. She appears on Coast to Coast AM, Ancient Aliens, and has traveled to, are you ready, Venezuela, Peru, Brazil, England, Norway, France, Switzerland, the Netherlands, Yugoslavia, Turkey, Ethiopia, Kenya, Egypt, Australia, Japan, Canada, Mexico, the Yucatan, Puerto Rico, for research and productions. In addition to all of her stuff she does on Earth Files, Linda now has a brand new series over on Gaia called Truth Hunters, and I would like to welcome back to Fade to Black, the one and only LMH, Linda Moulton Howe. Linda, good evening.
Thank you, Jimmy, very much. As you go through all those countries, what was rushing through my mind were image after image of places and things that I have been exhilarated by the ability to go directly to where I wanted to research something, and it really does make a difference when you can get a reality check. And so I've tried so hard in my life, and to hear you sum up all of those countries that I have been, over time it doesn't seem that many, but now it does, and I am so glad.
How much Red Bull is in your refrigerator?
I think I was born with high energy, and I have it to this day, and I would never have been able to have the life I have if I had not been blessed with a lot of energy and stamina, and it does make a difference because I can go easily for 18 or 20 hours for a week or two and just keep going. And then I can then relax really heavily, but I always have, God, please keep me going. I've always been able to do that. 18-hour days have been kind of standard for me.
Well, you know, I'm going to tell everybody about our conversation that we had earlier today, which is this. I'm talking to Linda, and I said, Linda, we've got a little extra time tonight. I've got some other stuff we're going to do, but, we've got a little, and this is Linda. I'm quoting her directly. Jimmy, I just got back from England. I've got Phenomenon Radio tomorrow. I got Coast to Coast on Thursday, and then I've got to go over to Gaia. I've got to shoot my television show, then I got to come back. I am busy. And I said, Linda, it's better than being unemployed. And it's just so funny. I don't know how you get it all done, young lady. It's pretty tremendous.
I know. Everything is back to back anymore, and you probably are feeling it too. Boats are rising in a sea that seems to be headed toward, we're going to get an announcement that we're not alone in this universe, whether it's coming from signals in outer space or whether it's coming from our ancient past or whatever it is. I think everybody that has ever been seriously investigating why the government has been covering up since World War II, a true fact that we're not alone and that there's an alien presence on this planet now as we speak. And if this is the year that it is finally going to be opened up with some kind of a headline, it might explain why. I did get back from England Sunday, and this is Wednesday night, so it was only 3 days ago. And I was there for 2 weeks, and a big part of the reason why I was there was to speak at the awakening that was organized in Manchester at the big bowling center there. And the night that I and Eric von Daniken were scheduled to be the evening keynote speakers, they had 1,200 people packed into this huge conference room. And I was up first as the keynote speaker, and I was doing my symbols, looking at the whole issue of symbols in binary code in high strangeness phenomena with military and abductees.
Right.
And it was a 2-hour program, and it was just a packed audience. I couldn't even get all people in one shot with my iPhone, and so I did a tiny panorama at myearthfiles.com just so you could see a bit of this huge audience. And when I reached at the end of the 2 hours, and I said, "Thank you, Manchester," I had friends in the audience who told me they'd never felt or seen anything like it. All 1,200 people jumped up on their feet. They were screaming, shouting. The organizers said, "Why don't you go down and show them or start autographs and photos while we set up for Eric?" And Eric's a great friend of mine, and I was happy to do this transition. Well, I'm going through talking with people, and then I hear Eric is making an announcement, and I come back to a chair, and nobody knows what's happening because Eric is saying, and an international award-winning journalist, Linda Moulton Howe, the 2017 Stellar Citizen Award, and he's holding this beautiful crystal, and they're saying, "Linda, get up on the stage. You're being presented an award." That's how I was shocked, and everybody was shocked. And I came up to the podium where Eric was, and he handed me this beautiful, gorgeous crystal carved by a laser. And when I went to take it from his hand, it weighs at least 18 or 19 pounds. And as it came into my hands, and I realized, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to hang on to this, I raised it up over my head because it's easier to hold something heavy like that. And some photographers got a great picture of Eric, me holding up that crystal, and I want everybody to know why I held it up like sports people do, because when you're handed something that heavy, and the moment, that's the only place to put it is above your head.
I just posted for everybody. Just go over to Earth Files. It's up in Twitter right now, and you can see the images, and look at the smile on Linda's face. That award weighs about a half an ounce at that moment.
Yeah, that's right, because I was really, really exhilarated and elated, and I could not imagine anything more wonderful than getting this. Eric received the Stellar Citizen Award last year, so I'm the second, and I've known Eric von Däniken for quite some time, and he and I have had some really extraordinary conversations about Egypt and the challenges of trying to work with governments to get permissions, to go through stone, to dig, to find things, and that as much as he has accomplished in his life in trying to keep pushing that forward, I have tried on we'll call it all of the phenomena that seems related to an alien presence, to keep trying to also dig into what are the facts and the truth. And one of the subjects that I have always thought was very, very important and seems to be making headlines now so much, Jimmy, is Antarctica. And there's both rumor out there and I think not true facts, but one of the repeating themes, even in England, people were asking me about Antarctica a lot.
Right.
Why? Because on the election week in the United States, there came this headline, John Kerry's Antarctica visit highlights a continent. And it says this is the highest-ranking United States government official ever to visit Antarctica. And when did he get there? He was in the McMurdo, our station in Antarctica in the south. He was there on Friday, November 11th, 2016, and there were photographs in the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Guardian, all over the world, showing our Secretary of State climbing on ice, and then the New York Times reported, this is amazing actually, I'm not sure a lot of people understood this, John Kerry hiked over 2 days for hours. Now, they captioned this saying that he was there doing all of this walking, traveling, flying in Antarctica because of global climate change. And maybe he was meeting with National Science Foundation scientists to talk about that, but it was December 1st, so it was only 2 weeks later, that there came this other headline: Buzz Aldrin is medically evacuated from Antarctica. This is only 2 weeks after John Kerry is there.
Right.
And everyone is saying, why was Neil Armstrong down in the same place that John Kerry had been? And this leads to one of the most solid and important interviews I've ever done with somebody who sent me their DD-214, their certificates, all of this stuff, photographs of them in Antarctica, and it's all at Earth Files, and that's in my, it was 2 years ago. My first report on this was January 30th, 2015, and I only can call him Brian, and he's provided all of these insignias and the certificates and all of this material that backs up he is who he says he is. And when and how did this come about? He sent me in January of 2015 a very intelligent and well-written email that captured my attention because it was articulate, and I knew I was getting an email from somebody who was a professional today, even in the past. And it began, Linda, I am a retired United States Navy LC-130 flight engineer. I retired after 20 years of service in 1997. I have been wanting to write you for a long time about my experience on the Antarctic continent with flying vehicles that I was told not to talk about. I served part of my 20 years in the Navy with a squadron called Antarctic Development Squadron 6, VXE-6, as it was also known. I served with this squadron from around 1983 until I retired March of 1997. Being a flight engineer and flying more than 4,000 hours in that capacity, I have seen things that most people have not even imagined on the continent of Antarctica. The land there seems more alien than earthly. Our deployments to this land started in late September and ended the end of February every year until the squadron was decommissioned in 1999. And he said, during my time in the squadron, I flew to almost every part of the Antarctic continent, including the South Pole, more than 300 times. McMurdo Station is about 3.5 hours from the South Pole. Now, he goes into experiences where they, in this big C-130, a crew usually of about 15 to 17 Navy guys, he's a flight engineer, and they would have to do medical emergencies. They would have to fly National Science Foundation scientists in. They did all this sort of thing, and they often had to go to what was called Davis Camp. That is the Australian camp. That is on the far east Antarctica coast, and McMurdo is down in the south of West Antarctica, and dividing those two. And there's a great map that I have that he helped me with that I have at Earth Files in my report from January 30th called U.S. Navy Flight Engineer Saw Silver Discs and an Entrance to an Alleged ET and Human Collaboration Base in Antarctica. And those words in that title come from him. Now, when you look at this map that I have at Earth Files that he drew and helped me with, you see the trans-Antarctic mountains dividing West and East Antarctica. And then you see a red X on the Beardmore Glacier. What is so interesting is he describes in an interview with me and in his early email that he sent, he said that they always went along or over the trans-Antarctic mountains and would go by the South Pole to a place where they could refuel if they were going across to the Davis Station on the far west coast of East Antarctica. And he said this happened several times, and he said we would see silver discs, shiny objects, which I would say from our altitude look circular. and they would sprint to maybe 3 or 4 mountaintops in the Transantarctic Mountains, and then they would stop in the air. Then maybe 1 or 2 would come up and meet the others, and then they would start off in another direction doing this sort of ballet of these silver round things staying over the Transantarctic Mountains, and this was a mystery to them. As many times as they saw this happen, they saw that these silver discs, quote, never went over the Beardmore Glacier. It became something that they noticed, as if there was a glass wall there that these discs would not pass, and they could not understand it. And he raised it to me. I think, Linda, that there might be some kind of an agreement, that there's geopolitical territorial divisions, and that for some reason, whatever is in those silver discs is not allowed to or will not go over the Beardmore Glacier. That was one of the things that they noticed and they talked about. Now, they had a medical emergency over at that Davis Station on the far west side of the East Antarctic part of Antarctica. And he said, we were against a time. We knew it was a medical evacuation, like what happened with Buzz Aldrin, who they had to medically evacuate him out of Antarctica. This was another one of those cases. And the period of time we're talking about is 1997, before he had retired, and a whole bunch of this UFO stuff happened that year when they were in Antarctica.
Right.
So they realized that if they can't cut time, this person, it could be life or death.
Right.
So they're in the air, and they're all talking about why do they have to use up extra time to go around a section on their map that they have always paid attention to, and they never really had asked, and it was a no-fly zone printed very clearly on their military map that they were not to fly in this area at the South Pole. And they say, well, look, if we can go across, we're going to cut 3.5 hours of our time getting over to Davis. And so the crew chief says to them all, well, I think that's what we should do. And one of them says, well, why is there this no-fly zone at the South Pole? And their chief says he's told that it's because there's an air sampling station. And then they all laugh and say, air sampling station, no fly zone, we're flying at 36,000 feet. We can't possibly be contaminating anything on the ice at the South Pole. And they all agree this makes no sense, that there must be another reason, and it's being covered up with this explanation of an air sampling station. And that's how the chief decides, let's go for it, let's cut this time, and let's handle this medical emergency. And as they are flying now over the no-fly zone, for the first time, they all see this huge hole in the ice. And he said it looked like it was curved, like it was formed. This was not jagged. And it looked like it went down, slanting. And he estimated, Brian, the naval flight engineer, along with the rest of the crew, that this was maybe 300 feet, between 100 and 300 feet in diameter, which would be 100 feet to 300 feet. That would be a football field. Mm-hmm. And that it was actually going on this slant down into the ice, and they all talked about it on the radio with McMurdo. Now, that gives you a hint about, so they get their medical emergency handled, but what happens? They get back to McMurdo, and men in black suits, white shirts, come to them and tell them that they are never to talk about this hole in the ice, and their chief is told they're never to do this again, and they know it's serious business, but they are not sure why until now. Not long after this medical emergency, they get word that they have a mission to fly National Science Foundation sponsored scientists. that are going to fly into McMurdo, the USA base in the south of the West Antarctic, and they are to fly, it's 15 or 17, he thought, of these scientists, mostly men, to Marie Byrd Land. And on my map at Earth Files, it's labeled Missing Scientists and a big red X. At Marie Byrd Land, you can see McMurdo. You can see the Transantarctic Mountains where the silver disk would fly over. You can see the Beardmore Glacier that for reasons unknown, those disks would never go onto that glacier. And you can see the X is where Brian did all of these locations. It is the big hole in the ice not far from the magnetic pole of the South Pole. So now we see where the missing scientists from McMurdo are to the west. And they have the C-130. They load up. He said it was a ton of gear with all these scientists, and everything was normal, and they land. And when they're getting ready to leave, they tell the scientists, look, here's the number, you need to keep checking in with McMurdo every day so that we know that you're all right. If you have an emergency, you call this number. We want you to always know that we are ready to help you if you need help. So the crew goes back to McMurdo. 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days go by, not a single phone call.
Wow.
So by the seventh day, it's considered now an emergency of unknown nature.
Mm-hmm.
And the same crew's involved all the time. These are the same guys. This is why he's such a valuable witness. And they go back to Marie Byrd Land. They fly over in the C-130, and they start rotating, going into a large circle, tightening the circle over the camp, and they're looking for dogs, sleds, any signs of anything, trucks, cars, crashes, anything. And it absolutely looks perfect, but there are no people, there's no movement, there's no machines. It's eerie. So they report that they're not seeing anybody, and they land, and there's nobody there. And so they are brought back to McMurdo, and they're completely baffled. Everybody is baffled. They go another week. So now this is the end of the second week. Those scientists were to be there for 3 or 4 weeks, and now they've been missing for 2 weeks. A phone call comes in to McMurdo. Brian is the crew. They get a call again. You got to go back. We've got a call. The scientists are back. So Brian says they land, and they were expecting that they would see normal, elated, oh, my God, and that they'd be hearing stories, that the scientists would be there. Instead, they land. This group, he thought there was at least one female. He was not sure because everybody was in parkas and stuff, but he thinks there was one female and the rest male. And the scientists, there's not a word. This is a group of people that have been missing for 2 solid weeks.
Right.
And they have landed, and they are now to get them into the plane. And there's not a word, not hello, not anything. And now the crew is completely confused about what is happening. And they start trying to help the scientists. They're putting gear in. They're letting the scientists into the seats. They're trying to see if they will talk. Complete total silence. And Brian said he had one of the seats what would fit or would look to the back of the plane, not to the front. And he took that because then he could see the scientists more easily, and he was amazed at this silence. So he said he sat down in this chair that was faced to the back, and one man sat in a seat that was maybe 3 to 5 feet from him, where Brian is sitting. And he said he leaned forward and he said something like, is there anything that I could get for you? And the scientist was looking at his shoes or at the floor. And when Brian said, I leaned forward and I was just gently trying to see if I could help them or they could start any conversation and we could find out what had happened. And he said, when I did that, that scientist did not move. His staring at the floor didn't change. And at that point, Brian told me, Linda, we knew about then. We're dealing with something like post-traumatic shock.
Right.
And they flew back to McMurdo. And then, this is another very interesting part of all this that makes you wonder. They were told and ordered that all of the gear, was tremendous amounts of gear, was going to be picked up by one plane, and it was going to be flown back to the United States, all this gear. But the scientists, they were picked up and flown by another completely different plane all together to Christchurch in New Zealand.
Right.
So the crew, they are just really puzzled, and guess what shows up again? The guys in the black suits and the white shirts, and they tell the crew they haven't seen, they're not to talk about the scientists, they're not to talk about any of this. And he said that when they were like over in a mess hall at McMurdo, everybody, and this is a quote from my report, this is Brian, this is right from him, everybody was speculating. It was like, man, what did these people see? Why were they gone for 2 weeks that nobody knew where they were? It was like, these people are freaked out by something, and they just wanted to get out of there, and they picked them up, and they went to Christchurch. And he said that he asked, and other people said, we wondered if we were going to be going back there to pick up dead bodies, but instead we have scientists that seem to be absolutely shocked to complete stillness, looking at the floor. And when they were told that they were not to talk about this,
Linda,
that was the
Linda,
icing on the cake.
Right. I've got to take a break right here, and I don't want to. I can't break this up. We've got to do it right. What happened
next? When I come back, I'll tell you
Yes,
more.
I know you will. Linda Moulton Howe is our guest. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. You can follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Follow Linda at Earth Files. This is Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network and KGRA The Planet. More with LMH, Linda Moulton Howe, when we come back. Stay with us.
This is Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
The station that talks the net. KGRA Radio.
Hello, I'm Kat Deely, and you're listening to my main man, Jimmy Church, on jimmychurchradio.com.
Hi, this is Ray Hobbs here, repping the planet, and you're listening to my good friend, Jimmy Church, Fade to Black, on the Game Changer Network and the KGRA Digital Broadcast Station.
This is Toby Kebbell. You're listening to jimmychurchradio.com. Don't hurt me, Jimmy. I'm only little.
Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier. And this is Ari Gold. We're the Honey Brothers. Well, we are of the Honey Brothers. Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier. And I'm Ari Gold. We're the Honey Brothers. And you're listening to Jimmy Church. The Revolution.
What's up, Fadernauts? Studio Dome loves Fade to Black and the F2B audience so much that they have put together the ultimate stereo Bluetooth system. They've done it just for you. Man, check this out. The Studio Dome SBB2 stereo system is here. It's featuring 2 Studio Boombox 2 SBB2 wireless Bluetooth speakers, packed in its own custom hardshell case. This Studio Dome system features the very latest in stereo Bluetooth technology. The 2 full-range boomboxes are in true wireless stereo. You've got to hear this. It's amazing. It's just $129 and use the promo code JCRTWS and you'll also get free shipping. It's simple. Just go to jimmychurchradio.com, click on the Studio Dome banner. Go Beckley Tepe.
Balance of Nature's fruits and veggies.
I was diagnosed with congestive heart failure. I went from being able to work 14, 16 hours a day with no problem to where I could barely walk a block to the store. I went on to the phytonutrients about 6 months ago, and within a couple of months, my medical doctor had cut my prescriptions down in a little bit smaller dosage. The next time I went back a month later, I walked into the doctor's office and he says, "My gosh, what's happened to you? You don't even look like the same person." He looked at my legs and the swelling had gone down. My blood pressure was down. The venous stasis ulcers that I had had on my legs for the last 4 or 5 years because of the poor circulation were all healed, and I'm feeling far better.
The new challenge will allow you to receive 2 months of Balance of Nature's fruits and veggies free, and we'll even ship them to you free. Call now for details. Call 1-800-246-8751 or go online to balanceofnature.com. Use promo code TALK.
This is Micah Hanks of the Gralien Report, and you're listening to Jimmy Church on Fade to Black, across the globe on the Game Changer Radio Network and the one and only KGRA Radio, The Planet.
Welcome back, Fade to Black. Our guest tonight, Linda Moulton Howe. We're talking about Antarctica and her research and her whistleblower down there, Brian. And I want check this out, Linda. I was looking at the images of Manchester. Are those police barricades?
Yeah, sort of like they had put them up where there were speakers, cords, which was really good. Meant that they separated out any possibility of this huge crowd getting entangling with any of the cords and the speakers, and that's why they put those up. There was a lot of stuff down right there in front of the stage, and then the crowd began, and then when I had the award, they asked me to go down along that metal, and everybody was sort of patting me on my head and touching the crystal. And it was like a communion going along that metal bar with all of these people surging. It was like one of those moments, Jimmy, where some of us have been struggling for so long, like fish swimming upstream, right, trying to penetrate the facts that we have an alien presence and there are animal mutilations by non-humans and human abductions, and maybe healing. It is positive and negative and in between, and it is finally beginning to feel as if populations, not just in the United States, where there have been bigger and bigger crowds here too, but that in Europe, there were people in that audience because I had to sign so many autographs and get so many photographs, and there were people from literally every country that you can see on a map in Europe, and it is as if we'll call it the world citizen population is coming. It's already there in spite of the policies of denial by governments since World War II. And it's happening that people are saying, basically, we know that governments are lying about this, and they're moving on to wanting information. And it is sort of refreshing that there is that kind of response now in populations. They're not afraid. They want more knowledge. It looks like a Rolling Stones concert. I know. Right on, man. It felt like that too, because when I had presented my 2 hours and I said, "Thank you, Manchester," and all 1,200 people jumped up screaming all at the same time. It was really exhilarating. It was sort of like, yeah, we all get this. We are way past the governments. It was that feeling. It was exhilarating.
Congratulations, man. I've always wanted to say, thank you, Manchester.
Well, you can go and do it yourself, too. It was great, and I'm glad that we can share this on Fade to Black with you, but I would like to pick up where we left off.
Yeah, let's get right back to it.
This whole Antarctica situation is really, really serious when it comes to where has an alien presence been on this planet when it wanted to be in a place that we would not go as humans.
You know what's funny? When it comes to Antarctica, I do a lot of speaking and radio shows and all of that. And every time that I'm out there, what people want to hear, what they come up to, it's, disclosure, right? But it's Antarctica. That is what people want to know about.
Let's go to what Brian said about after the scientists had left for Christchurch and all of this equipment was, by the way, just to stress, all of the equipment was put in a place like an embargoed area that nobody could go to. The equipment itself seemed to be extremely important, and it was separated into a separate plane and went, as he learned later, to the United States. Well, here's a quote. This is from Brian, the retired U.S. Navy flight engineer. Talk among the flight crews was that there is a UFO base under the South Pole, and that some of the crew heard talk from some of the scientists working at the pole of EBAs. This is his term. EBAs, which you, I, and others know as extraterrestrial biological entities. That is an acronym our government has been using since the 40s.
Right.
So this is that the crews working at McMurdo heard scientists who would be coming and going talking about at South Pole of EBAs working with and interacting with the scientists at that so-called air sampling camp, which was the large ice hole that they flew over on that medical evacuation to Davis Station. So that is why Brian, from 1997 to 2015, he had sat on this story inside of himself, and then he contacted me because I had been doing reporting about the alleged Big Pyramid underground in Alaska, lots of archaeology. I've reported about the science of what is happening in the ice in Antarctica, and so that's why he sent me this large email, and we got in contact. Well, we stayed in contact on a regular basis from January 2015 until last year at Contact 2016 in Joshua Tree in California. Brian, and he has a nephew who has encountered UFOs when he was in Iraq. And he said, let's get together at Joshua Tree, all of us together, and talk. So we, on the first night, Thursday night, getting there, his nephew, a friend, and Brian, our flight engineer, and myself, we went to a noisy Mexican restaurant, is the way we joked about it, because we said, this is going to be so ironic, what I'm going to tell you. We said, well, if we're in a noisy place with a lot of tile, the NSA, CIA can't hear us so easily. And we actually talked about that as we went into the restaurant. It was a joke. So we sat there for about 2 hours having a meal and talking about all kinds of things in Antarctica, in Iraq, and lots of other things. And when we are finishing the meal, we all agreed that we really wanted to talk longer. So the parking lot to this Mexican restaurant in Joshua Tree had a lot of trees right above where the cars were parked. And they had a van that you could pull down the back door, and you could either sit or put stuff on there. And so we made a kind of a little park group. And now we're continuing our conversation out in the parking lot. And we left there probably around midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. And they dropped me back off at Contact, and they were going in their separate ways, one to Phoenix as Brian and his nephew into California. Okay, so on Monday, I did an intensive, what they call the intensive 3 hours that they asked some of us speaker to do on Monday after the weekend. And I'm now in the car being driven back to go to the airport in Palm Springs to come back to Albuquerque when I get a phone call. And the phone call is coming from Brian's nephew. And he said to me, they're in the car. Dolan was up in the front seat, and I'm in the back seat on a cell phone having this conversation. And he said that morning, Monday morning, when they were all back home in Phoenix, Brian was at his work, and he has sensitive work still, not for the Navy, but he's still he has to have a clearance to do the work that he does for an aerospace company in Phoenix. He does not give out that number, I can guarantee you, because I have to call him on a different cell phone. I have a home number. I cannot call his office, right? So that means even people working with him cannot call that phone number. That's how sensitive it is. And here we pick up in the recorded interview that everybody can hear Brian speaking to me in his own voice about what happened on Monday after contact in June of 2016. Brian. And the voice on the other end of the line when I picked up the phone said, "Is this Brian?" I said, "Yes, who is this?" Because I didn't recognize the number. He could see any numbers on the screen of the special phone in his office. "I want to tell you what you have been talking about. You need to stop talking about," says the voice that has still not identified itself on the phone. Brian said, "What stuff?" The man says, "We know that you were with Linda Howe on last Thursday night, and we know that you went to dinner at a Mexican restaurant in Joshua Tree, and we were aware of what you were talking about with her and other people, and that your experience that you had when you were on the ice, which means South Pole in Antarctica, when you were in the service, we don't want you talking about that. Specifically, we don't want you talking about the scientists that you picked up after being missing for a couple of weeks." Brian said, "How would you know about that? I've only talked to certain people." The voice on the phone said, "We know pretty much everything." Jimmy, this is a quote.
Linda, why do you cause so much trouble?
Well, just think about the words in this and put it in the context of all the stuff that's going on about intel agencies right now. We know pretty much everything, which means they listen to everything.
Right.
And he said, just don't be putting that out there anymore. Certain people would prefer that you not talk about that. And Brian said, "Well, I'll consider that." And the phone went click. It went dead. Whoever was on the other end hung up. And Brian said, "Wow, this is out of the blue, and how did they reach my office?"
Right.
So now, this is very good. He's very bright. He's very intelligent. He immediately looked at the number again on his cell phone, wrote it down, and then Googled it on the Internet. It came up, general phone number for the National Security Agency at Fort Meade, Maryland.
Bingo.
Yeah. So and then I ended up talking to Brian about this. And Brian said to me, as I said to him, "Why would the NSA make itself so obvious that it was listening through satellite, through God only knows, all of our phones, cars, everything now, at that restaurant, and that why would they do such a dramatic call to Brian at his office where nobody is supposed to be able to reach him, to do a threat in 2016 about a 1997 missing scientist in Antarctica event?" And now to top all of this off, so here's a threat. Brian says, "Look, I'm not going to stop sharing information with you. I never signed a non-disclosure agreement about a single thing that we were told about and warned about by the suits in Antarctica. None of us were asked to sign a non-disclosure agreement. He said, therefore, I am not doing anything wrong, and I think that you need to be reporting this because the truth is there are non-humans, from everything that we know, there are non-humans somewhere under the ice in Antarctica.
What does that, with everything that we know today coming at us from all these directions, going, not only the obvious with Carrie, but other researchers, and that there is something going on down there that we can tie into a lot of different aspects with the history of the world, right? But what does all of this ultimately tell you? It's certainly suppression. It's that.
Now,
right?
we all know that David Wilcock and Corey Good have been talking for a year about the possibility of, well, I would say they don't even say possibility. They would say that there are 3 pyramids under ice, under some installation, in the installation at Lake Vostok. It's not clear. It could be any number of places in Antarctica. And they've been saying that on Gaia, in their productions, in conferences, and everything. Well, now, that's 2016. You can go back to 2002. That's going back 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
A British documentary was being touted as, in a press release dated March 18th, 2002. It was issued from the Atlantis Mapping Project in Washington, D.C. This is a real press release. It was published and talked about in some media, and going back 15 years, and it started out, the U.S. government, this is a quote, the U.S. government said it will seek to block the airing of a video found by Navy rescuers in Antarctica that purportedly reveals that a massive archaeological dig is underway 2 miles beneath the ice. That is the Lake Vostok area that Russia has been trying to do that drilling, and they said 2 years ago that they had gotten down to that fresh water 2 miles under ice, and they claim that their drill broke at some place and that they were stopping all operations, and that is all we've ever heard, something about a broken pipe, and nobody knows whether it's true or what is going on. But that's 2 years ago. I'm talking about 15 years ago is this release that came out in a press release. The video in 2002 was allegedly the property of a Beverly Hills company that called itself the ACE, when you go at sound in an email, they had that Atlantis TV that produced the Atlantis Mapping Project channel for the BBC in London until 2015, when it was closed down. 2015 is when all this strange stuff happened about the broken pipe by the Russians. The March 2002 press release also said that the Atlantis TV crew had disappeared and that 2 U.S. Navy officers had found the missing production crew's videotape, quote, in an abandoned supply dump 100 miles west of Vostok Station. That is the lake that is the station is above ground, but the lake that it's named after is 2 miles under the ice. And this would be near the South Pole. The press release said the video showed a pyramid and other spectacular ruins and things that they could not go into, the production crew would not talk about. Allegedly, Navy SEALs came in 1 or more helicopters to take archaeological objects away. Officials of the U.S. Naval Support Task Force in Antarctica, known as USNSTF, denied the story and said the Navy did not possess any video shot by the missing Atlantis TV crew. But at the same time, there was a simultaneous U.S. legal action to block the release of a hardcover book entitled Raising Atlantis by Tom Greenius, A novel based on fact is what it says. The book is about a secret U.S. military expedition that discovers ancient ruins 2 miles beneath the ice in Antarctica. The government allowed the first electronic e-book version out in the spring of 2002 to be released with sensitive information about U.S. underground installations. But the fall 2002 hardcover of Raising Atlantis was blocked until the sensitive information was deleted by the publisher. Now, all of that comes, I have it. I went and I found the 2002 press release. I did a huge effort to try to find the original e-book that in the press release said the government didn't hassle the e-book and even gave an explanation. They did not in 2002 think that there was going to be anybody reading the e-book and then getting the paper book and comparing, because then if you did that, if you had the ability to do that, you might find the sensitive information. And that's why they scrubbed the paper version in 2002. Well, Jimmy, if there is a link between that huge 100 to 300 foot diameter hole at the South Pole and this story in 2002 and what David and Corey have been talking about in 2016, all relating to archaeological pyramids, archaeological statues, archaeological I think they in Conscious Life Expo they were talking about some sort of a stone plaza.
Right.
And if all of that is 2 miles under ice at Lake Vostok, the largest freshwater lake in the planet is Lake Vostok under 2 miles of ice. If that is true, and if the science, which is quite controversial, you'd be surprised when you start trying to research when was the last time there was no 2 miles of ice in Antarctica, you get a kind of consensus of mashed data maybe 13 million years ago. Now, if this year there is a breakthrough that relates to why Buzz Aldrin might have been there, why really John Kerry might have been there, why the year before somebody from the Vatican or
the Catholic Church, right?
Yeah. Okay. If this is it, if this is building up that they're going to introduce an alien presence through archaeology in Antarctica under ice, 2 miles, and the headline is archaeology now confirmed that covers land under 2 miles of ice, and the last time on Earth that ice was gone was 13 million years ago. Immediately, this is revolutionary because there were no Homo sapiens sapien anywhere on this planet 13 million years ago. Not us, not Neanderthalensis, not Denisovans. This is a whole new ballgame, and this may be how they open this up.
I'll tell you something really interesting, that it's not the end-all on this, but all of Antarctica, like 95% or 90% of it, is all high-res on Google Earth, except the Beardmore Glacier. It's pixelated. You can zoom in and you can grab high-res images of all of Antarctica, right?
Yeah.
And you go over Beardmore and you go to zoom in, it immediately goes to pixelation. Now, I don't know why that is. I have looked at all of Antarctica.
It's the same thing in the Gale crater on Mars. I did a report at earthfiles.com saying, why have they been messing with the Gale crater? It's so clear that there have been pasted in stuff over areas. And so if we're doing that on Mars, and we've had firsthand testimony from people who have worked at NASA that it's been done at the moon, that we've covered up archaeology on the moon, and people were paid to do that, and in our own world, Google Earth is the only access that you, I, and most of us have to places like Antarctica, China, and so forth.
That's right.
And I've run into this many times where you will be going down to, it looks like 10 feet, and you're in detail, and then you want to move over to you want to look at forest, or you want to look at, and then it's completely blurred out. And some of these map people will say, oh, well, it's just because they hadn't photographed and replaced that with high res. But it's suspicious that it's so many times when there's been phenomena reported and you want to look at it in detail, high res, and those are the areas where there is no high res.
Coincidence? I think not. All right. It's so true, though. It's always, it's where something is going on. We want to go, and specifically there, boom, pixelated. And the Beardmore Ice Shelf and that glacier, that section, that area. The rest of Antarctica, you can go look at all the ice you want in high res, right?
Yeah.
You can go and do it, all the mountains, but you can't on the Beardmore Glacier.
And, one of the things that Brian told me when we were talking about the scientists and the gear and all of that, he said somebody overheard that there really was an installation that was these were the key words, joint venture.
Right.
At the South Pole, and joint venture meant between some of our military and whatever is still there in Antarctica that is referred to as an alien presence.
Linda, you've got a very busy week in front of you. Go work. Go give us some more stuff that only you do. Just thank you so much.
Keep going to Earth Files. Everybody keep going to Earth Files. I've got a new, very interesting, more mystery about the Alaska Underground Dark Pyramid. It's a fascinating new interview that I'm doing with somebody, and I think you will all find this really quite amazing. She does good illustrations on what she has seen, and that is another big mystery at the other end of the Earth.
And everybody go check out The Truth Hunter on Gaia. Linda Moulton Howe. Linda, we love you so much. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you, Jimmy. I love